I always thought I had a good read on people. I'd been with Avery for almost 6 years when it all came crashing down. 6 years. Long enough to build a life, a home, and dreams. We'd gotten married young, sure, but it felt like we were on the same path, like we understood each other. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but we made it work. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Avery wasn't the easiest person to live with. She had this self-centered streak that kept showing up in little ways, like when she'd blow off plans we made or forget to follow through on things we agreed on. But I chalked it up to her being busy with her career. She was ambitious, always chasing the next thing, and maybe I was just too naive to see the signs of what was really happening. At the time, I thought I loved her enough to overlook her flaws. I thought, eventually, she'd grow up, settle down, and we'd build the life I dreamed of. I was wrong. The first real crack in our relationship came when we talked about adopting a kid. We'd been trying to get pregnant for a while with no luck, and I figured adoption might be a good alternative. Avery agreed at first, seemed excited about the idea. But, as usual, her excitement fizzled out. A few weeks later, she was back to being her old self, distant, distracted, and spending more time at the bar with her friends than at home with me. I tried talking to her about it. I asked her flat out why she wasn't as invested in the adoption process anymore. She gave me some excuse about not being ready and how it wasn't the right time. It was always something with her, always a reason why she couldn't commit to anything. I wanted to believe her, but it felt like she was just pulling away more and more. That's when I started to get suspicious. But there was always this little part of me, this dumb part, that refused to think she would do something that horrible. Then came Luca. He was a massage therapist. I don't know why, but something about him rubbed me the wrong way from the start. It was probably just the way Avery talked about him. How he was so professional and how relaxed she felt after her sessions. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. But after a while, I started noticing things. She'd go to see Luca for an appointment and be gone for hours. I don't mean a couple of hours. I'm talking about long, suspicious stretches of time. When I asked her where she was, she'd give me some vague excuse, like she was running errands or taking time for herself. She always had a reason, but it never quite added up. It wasn't until I ran into Lila, one of my oldest friends, that the truth finally hit me. I remember it clear as day. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was at the local coffee shop picking up my usual when Lila waved me over from her table. I hadn't seen her in a while, so we caught up for a bit, talking about life, work, and how everything had been going. And then, out of nowhere, she dropped it. "You know," she said casually, stirring her coffee, "I ran into Avery the other night." I could tell from the way she said it that something was off. My heart sank. "Yeah, where?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though I was already on edge. "At Luca's place," Lila replied, glancing at me over the rim of her cup. "She was with him. I saw them through the window." My stomach twisted. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. I tried to play it cool, but my mind was racing. I couldn't believe it. Lila wasn't the type to joke about something like this. "Are you sure?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Positive," she said, her voice softer now. I didn't want to say anything, but it was pretty obvious. She wasn't just getting a massage. I don't remember much of what happened after that. My brain was overloaded, trying to process what Lila had just told me. I was in shock. I had to take a minute, but I managed to thank her for telling me, then quickly excused myself. I don't even think I said goodbye. I just had to get out of there. That night, I didn't confront Avery. Not right away. I couldn't. I wasn't ready. Instead, I started digging, checking her phone, looking at her bank statements, finding anything I could to confirm what I already knew deep down. What I found was worse than I could have imagined. Receipts for dinners I hadn't been a part of, texts that were way too intimate for a massage therapist, and hotel bookings that didn't match up with any of our plans. The evidence was right there in front of me. Avery had been lying to me for months, and I wasn't sure what hurt more. The fact that she betrayed me, or the realization that she'd been doing it so casually, with no remorse. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The days after I found out about Avery and Luca felt like I was living in a fog. I could barely focus at work, couldn't sleep without tossing and turning, and every time I saw her, I just wanted to explode. But I didn't. I kept it together. I didn't confront her, not yet. No, I was smarter than that. I knew this had to be handled carefully. She had been lying to me for months, and I wasn't about to just give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. The last thing I wanted was to give her the power to twist the situation into something where I came out looking weak. I was done with being her fool. I spent a lot of time planning during those next few days. I had to gather all the evidence I could, make sure everything was airtight. I knew Avery was good at lying and manipulating. Hell, she'd been doing it for years, but I wasn't going to let her talk her way out of this one. She wouldn't get the chance to spin this into something where she could play the victim. The first thing I did was get my hands on her phone. She was usually so careless about it, leaving it lying around or not locking it up when she went to take a shower. I'd learned over the years to pick up on little things like that. I scrolled through her messages, her emails, everything. Nothing was off limits. What I found confirmed every suspicion I had. There were texts between her and Luca that made my stomach turn. She was talking about things that no wife should be talking about with another man. How he made her feel alive again, how she was so lucky to have found him. But what hit hardest was the message that said, "I can't wait to be with you tonight. Jackson won't be home until late. I'll be all yours." It was clear as day. She didn't care about me anymore. She didn't care about the life we built together. And I had to admit, I was angry. No, scratch that. I was furious. But it wasn't just the anger that consumed me, it was the heartbreak, too. I didn't deserve this. I'd been nothing but good to her, supportive, patient. I'd given her my best, and this was how she repaid me? By sleeping with some guy who probably didn't even care about her? It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the disrespect. But I had to stay calm. I had to think. There was a part of me that wanted to scream at her right then and there, but I knew that would make me look desperate. It would give her the chance to make excuses, to turn this around on me somehow. No, I couldn't let her have that. Instead, I made sure to keep up appearances. I acted like everything was fine. I didn't want her to see me coming. I didn't want her to know that I knew. I kept my distance, started spending more time out of the house. I went to the gym, stayed late at work, did anything I could to give her space and time to hang herself. But the thing about lies is, they can only stay hidden for so long. Avery wasn't as careful as she thought. She slipped up one night when I came home early. She was on the phone with Luca, and she didn't see me coming up the stairs. I overheard the tail end of their conversation. She was telling him how much she missed him, how she couldn't wait to leave me, to start a life with him. I stood there, frozen in the hallway, listening to her plan out her future with the guy who had been sleeping with her behind my back. It felt like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. Not yet. I knew the time for confrontation was near. It was just a matter of getting everything lined up, making sure I had all the evidence I needed to make her see just how much she had destroyed. But I couldn't do it just yet. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. Not when I had a plan. Instead, I waited. I kept my distance, pretending everything was normal. But every day, the anger inside me grew. Every day, the desire for justice became clearer. Avery didn't get to walk away from this without consequences. I wouldn't let her. I was patient, playing the long game. And when the time was right, when she least expected it, I was going to make her pay. By the time I had all the evidence I needed, I was done pretending. The mask I'd been wearing for weeks, the calm exterior, the polite conversations, it was all about to come crashing down. I had spent so much time keeping things together, not letting on that I knew what she'd been doing, but deep down I was exhausted. I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. I was ready to take action, and I knew I had to do it soon. Avery was still acting like everything was normal. She hadn't picked up on any of my changes, probably too wrapped up in her little affair with Luca to notice that I was already plotting my revenge. I was about to give her the shock of her life. It all started with a simple dinner. I planned it for a Wednesday night, a quiet night when we didn't have any plans. Avery had been out with her friends the night before, and I could tell she was a little tipsy when she came home. She stumbled through the door, laughing at something on her phone, completely oblivious to the storm that was coming. I made sure everything was set, phone on silent, documents and screenshots of her texts neatly printed out, and my heart racing with anticipation. The hardest part was pretending like everything was fine. I offered her a drink when she walked in, acting like nothing was wrong, but I could feel the tension building between us. She was too busy trying to ignore me to notice the coldness in my eyes. "How was your night?" I asked, keeping my voice even, as though I hadn't just spent the last few days digging through her lies. "It was fine," she replied, smiling too wide. "Just with the girls, you know. Nothing special." I nodded, pushing my food around on my plate, careful not to give away anything. I wasn't ready to throw everything at her just yet. I wanted her to feel that unease, the silence that hung between us. It was like a game of cat and mouse, and right now I was the cat. Then, I made my move. "I was going through some old files on the computer earlier," I said, still keeping my voice casual. "And I found some interesting things. Some things I didn't know about." Avery's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly covered it up, taking a sip of her wine. "What kind of things?" she asked, trying to act nonchalant. "Funny you should ask." I slid my phone across the table toward her, showing her the texts between her and Luca. She froze. Her eyes went wide, then darted down to the screen. I watched as the color drained from her face, and the blood in my veins boiled. I could have said a million things in that moment, could have screamed at her, could have thrown every curse word I knew in her face. But I didn't. I just let the silence hang there between us, watching her squirm. She didn't even have the decency to look guilty at first. Instead, she just stared at the phone, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for it. "Jackson, she started, but I cut her off. "No, don't bother," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I've seen everything. I know exactly what's been going on. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you?" She looked at me, caught in the act, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She knew she had nowhere to run now. But the pity was fleeting. What she did next only confirmed everything I'd already suspected. "You don't understand," she said, her voice rising in that defensive way she always did when she was caught. "It's not like that. You've been distant, Jackson. I needed someone, and Luca. He's been there for me in ways you haven't." I couldn't believe the audacity. There it was, the justification. As if I hadn't been there for her, as if I was the problem. I sat back, shaking my head. "You needed someone? Avery, you've been lying to me, sleeping with another man behind my back. And you think I'm the one who's distant?" The anger finally broke through, but I kept my voice low. "I'm done with the excuses. It's over." She looked at me, her face full of panic, her eyes darting around like she was trying to think of something, anything, that could save her. "Jackson, please. I didn't mean for it to happen. It's just, we were drifting apart, and Luca made me feel alive again. You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," I cut in, standing up and walking toward the door. "You thought you could have both. You thought you could have your little affair and then come home to your husband like everything was fine. Well, I'm done playing the fool, Avery. It's over." I opened the door, but before I left, I looked back at her one last time. She was sitting there, her face flushed with guilt and shame, but there was no remorse in her eyes. Just fear. "Don't come back to me with more lies, Avery. You're not getting out of this that easy." I walked out of the house, leaving her to sit there in the mess she had made. My heart was racing, but I didn't feel the rush of anger I thought I would. Instead, it was like a weight was lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't stuck in the past anymore. I wasn't that fool she had been walking all over. I was free, and I was going to make sure she knew it. The silence in the house after I walked out felt louder than anything. I didn't go far, just down the street to the park. I needed a few minutes to collect myself, to breathe. The adrenaline was pumping through me, but there was no satisfaction, no feeling of victory. Not yet. It was like I had finally acknowledged the truth, but that didn't make the pain any less real. I couldn't just erase the years of trust, the memories I'd held onto, the dreams we'd built together. She had destroyed all of it in one reckless, selfish act. I sat on the bench, staring at the empty playground, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? What was next? I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without consequences. I wasn't sure how long I'd been sitting there when my phone buzzed. It was Avery. I let it ring, but I didn't pick up. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't care if she was crying or trying to talk her way out of it. The truth was out. It didn't matter what she said anymore. She called again. And again. I waited until the third call before I finally picked up, my voice cold when I spoke. What? Jackson, please. Can we talk about this? I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry. She started, but I cut her off. No. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice, Avery. My words came out sharp, like I was slicing through the air with them. You're not sorry. You're just sorry you got caught. Her voice wavered on the other end. That's not true. I never meant to hurt you, Jackson. I swear. Stop, I said, my patience running out. I'm done with your lies. I don't need to hear them. I don't need to hear anything from you. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing, soft sobs in the background. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. I didn't feel pity for her anymore. I didn't even feel angry. Just empty. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my voice steady, almost emotionless. First thing tomorrow. I'm done. I hung up before she could say anything else. It was over. It was done. And yet, it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the wreckage of everything I thought I knew. Divorce wasn't something I ever imagined for us. It wasn't a word I thought would apply to me. But I couldn't keep living in that lie. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. The next day, I did exactly what I said I would. I filed for divorce. The papers were simple, but the weight behind them wasn't. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, watching the attorney type up the documents, my mind still buzzing. I was numb, almost like I was on autopilot, moving through the motions. I called Lila after I filed. She had been the one to tell me about the affair, and I needed to thank her. It wasn't easy, knowing that she had seen Avery with Luca, but in a strange way, it felt like I owed her for helping me wake up. Lila, I said when she picked up, I'm done. I filed for divorce. It's really happening. Are you okay? She asked, her voice soft, full of concern. I thought about it for a moment. No, not really. But I will be. It's just, everything's changing so fast. I don't know if I'm ready for all of it. I know it's hard, she said. But you're doing the right thing. She doesn't deserve you, Jackson. I'm proud of you for taking control. It was nice to hear that. I didn't feel proud of myself. I felt broken, like a part of me had been torn away. But I couldn't let that keep me from moving forward. I had to keep moving, one step at a time. Avery's reaction to the divorce papers was exactly what I expected. She freaked out. She tried to play the victim, sending me long pleading messages about how we could fix this, and she was sorry. She even went as far as to say that it was just a phase with Luca and that I was being too harsh. I didn't even respond. It didn't take long for everything to unravel for her. Avery tried to stay in the house for a while, acting like nothing was wrong, but her presence in the place felt suffocating. She'd come home late at night, eyes bloodshot from crying or who knows what else. I could barely look at her without wanting to scream. Every time she spoke, her words felt hollow, like she was only saying things to get back in my good graces. I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I knew this wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about making sure she faced the consequences of her actions. She couldn't just walk away from this like it was nothing. She didn't get to destroy me and then keep her life intact while I picked up the pieces. But as much as I hated what she'd done to me, part of me still felt that familiar ache in my chest. I'd spent so many years with her, and to let that go felt like tearing apart something deep inside me. But I had to. I had to destroy the illusion of the life we'd built. And so, the final part of my plan began. I wasn't going to let her go without making sure she knew exactly what she lost. After I filed for divorce, everything felt like it was happening in fast forward. Avery, of course, was still in denial, convinced she could somehow sweet-talk her way back into my life. But I was done. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I could trust, was gone. And I was no longer the man who would sit around begging for her to come back. But as much as I was emotionally done with her, I knew that wasn't enough. She didn't just need to lose me, she needed to lose everything she'd built on her lies. She needed to feel the consequences of what she had done. And I wasn't going to be the guy who let her get away with this kind of betrayal without giving her a taste of her own medicine. The first thing I did was move quickly to freeze the joint accounts. I didn't want her draining our savings or using money to try and manipulate the situation in her favor. I had to be smart about this. Keep her off balance. So, I called the bank, explained that I was in the middle of a divorce, and put everything under my control. Avery didn't find out until a few days later. She came to me, angry and panicked. "What the hell, Jackson? You can't just cut me off like that. I need access to the accounts for bills." She stopped when she saw my face. "You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with Luca," I said, keeping my voice cold and even. I wasn't going to let her play the victim, not now. Avery's eyes narrowed, and she started to cry, real tears this time. "You're doing this to hurt me. You want to make my life miserable." I didn't flinch. "No, Avery. I'm doing this because you made my life miserable. I'm doing this because you betrayed me with a guy who doesn't give a damn about you. I'm doing this because you had no respect for me, no respect for this marriage." She just stared at me, as if waiting for me to say something that would take it all back. But I wasn't going to. She wasn't going to manipulate me anymore. And that was just the start. I had a plan for Luca, too. I had no idea who the guy really was. Just some smooth-talking massage therapist who had wormed his way into my wife's life. But that was about to change. I wasn't going to let him get away with his part in all this. It didn't take long to dig into Luca's background. I had a few connections, people who owed me favors, and I put them to work. One quick search, and I found out that Luca wasn't exactly the saint he made himself out to be. His massage therapy gig was a cover for something much worse. Turns out, Luca had a criminal record, a rap sheet for assault, fraud, and most shockingly, for running a series of small-time scams. He'd been arrested for breaking and entering a couple of years ago, though the charges had mysteriously dropped. I guess he had some connections of his own. I knew exactly what to do with that information. I anonymously sent the details of Luca's criminal record to the local media. The report went live in the middle of the week. Pictures of Luca, his history, the scams he'd been involved in, it all went public. But the best part? I included a little extra. A tip about his business activities and how he'd been using his massage parlor to run more than just therapeutic sessions. The kind of stuff that could get someone like him arrested again. Within 48 hours, the place was raided. The cops showed up, putting Luca under investigation for everything from illegal business practices to the more serious accusations that had been lurking in the background. It didn't take long for the story to spread. Luca was arrested in the middle of the night. The media had a field day. Avery's affair partner, her savior, was a criminal, a scam artist. It wasn't just embarrassing for him. It was embarrassing for her, too. I knew that as soon as she saw the news, her world would come crashing down. And it did. She came home that night, furious and scared. "What did you do, Jackson?" she yelled, slamming the door behind her. "What the hell is this? What did you say about Luca?" I didn't say anything. I just let her rant, let her spin her story about how I was trying to ruin her life. She kept throwing accusations at me, like I was the one who had made everything fall apart. "I didn't do anything, Avery," I finally said, leaning back in my chair and looking at her with that same cold detachment. "You did it all yourself. You chose him over me. You chose a man who had a record, who wasn't even good enough to be your lover. You're the one who destroyed this." Her face twisted in rage. "You're so bitter. You don't get it. I loved him." I just shook my head. "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of him. You wanted the escape. But you didn't love him. And that's why you're here, alone with nothing left." The silence that followed was thick. Avery stood there, trembling, on the verge of breaking down. For the first time, I saw her face the reality of what she had done. And I could see the panic creeping in. "You're ruining me," she whispered, almost pleading. I'm not the one who ruined you, Avery, I said, my voice low and final. You did that all on your own. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I didn't go after her. I didn't need to. The truth was out now, and it was bigger than any fight we could have had. Her life was spiraling, and I was finally free of it. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next step in my plan was to make sure that her reputation never recovered from this. Not just Luca's criminal record, but the truth about what she had been up to, how she had been hiding her affair all along, how she'd lied to everyone who cared about her. Avery didn't just betray me. She betrayed everyone. And she was going to pay for that, one way or another. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And Avery was going to learn that there was no getting away with what she had done. By the time I was done with Luca, it felt like I was just getting started. The papers had already covered his arrest, but that wasn't enough. I wanted Avery to feel the weight of everything she had done. She needed to understand that she wasn't going to just walk away from this mess, like she thought she could. The next step wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It was more subtle, more calculated. And it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone she had used and lied to over the years. I wasn't going to let her continue with her little fantasy life, where she could cheat, manipulate, and still expect to come out on top. The first move was contacting some of the people she had worked with. Clients, colleagues, people who'd once respected her. I wasn't about to let them stay in the dark about who she really was. I knew how she'd played the game, how she'd built this polished, perfect image of herself while behind the scenes. She was doing whatever she could to manipulate people, and she had done it to me for years. But I was no longer just her husband. I was the man who knew everything, and I wasn't going to keep her secrets. I started small. Just a few emails to key people in her circle, offering inside information about Avery's recent behavior. I didn't give them everything, just enough to make them question things, just enough to plant that seed of doubt. I knew how to play the game, and I knew how to get the right people talking. The first hit came from one of her biggest clients. The next morning, I got a text from Avery, her face red with anger. "Jackson, what the hell did you do? Why did I lose that account?" I let out a long sigh, pretending like I had no idea what she was talking about. "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. Don't lie to me." She was practically shouting through the phone now. "I know you've been telling people about me, about Luca and everything. I lost the Carmichael account because of you. They don't want to work with me anymore." I stayed calm, letting the silence stretch between us for a moment. "You lost it because of your own choices, Avery. You chose to put your affair above your career. You think I haven't noticed how you've been spending all your time with him? You think I haven't seen how you've been lying to everyone around you?" I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end. The panic was setting in now, and it felt damn good. "You think this is over?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You think you can just ruin me and walk away unscathed?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just hung up. A few hours later, it got worse. A former colleague of hers called me. His name was Jordan, and I knew he had a history of being a little too friendly with Avery back when we were still together. He was the type of guy who liked to hang around the office, cracking jokes and making everyone feel like they were in on something. Avery had always downplayed it, acting like nothing was happening. But I knew there had been more than just casual conversations between them. It was subtle, but I could tell there was something off. Jordan's call didn't come as a surprise, but it still felt good to hear his voice again, because now he was asking for help. "Jackson, I don't know what's going on, but Avery's in a really bad spot. People are starting to ask questions. The way she's been acting, well, it's not normal. She's not showing up for work, and her clients are pulling out. I don't know what's going on, but I wanted to give you a heads up." I paused for a second. "It's too late for that, Jordan. She did this to herself. She's been lying to everyone for months, and now it's all catching up to her." "I get it," he said, his voice hesitant. "But I never expected it to go this far. People are talking, and I'm just trying to figure out how I got dragged into it." I smiled a little, even though he couldn't see it. "You're not the one who dragged yourself in, Jordan. That's Avery. She's been manipulating people for a long time. She thinks she can get away with anything, and she's always had this way of making everyone around her think it's all someone else's fault. But the truth is, she's the one who messed up. You're just collateral damage. I could hear him sigh on the other end, a mix of guilt and frustration in his tone. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't think. No one did, I said, cutting him off. But now we all do. The next few days were chaos. Avery's world started to fall apart in ways she couldn't control. The clients she thought she could rely on started pulling back. Her reputation began to tarnish, slowly at first, then more visibly. It was like a domino effect. One person backed out, then another, and suddenly the entire foundation of her career was cracking. Avery came to me a couple of days later, her face pale, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. She barely looked like the woman I'd once known, the one who could charm her way out of anything. "Jackson," she whispered, almost pleading, "please. You have to stop this. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right." I could barely look at her. "It's too late, Avery. You had your chance. You've lost everything because you were too selfish to see what you were doing." Her voice cracked. I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think anyone would find out. That's the thing, Avery. You thought you could get away with it. You thought you could ruin my life and get away with it. But I'm not the one who's going to be ruined here. She didn't answer me. She just stood there, eyes welling up with tears, like I was supposed to feel sorry for her. But I didn't. Not anymore. "I'll let you know when the divorce is final," I said, standing up. "Until then, I think it's best if you stay out of my way." I turned and walked away from her for the last time. The weight of everything I'd done, of everything she had done, didn't feel as heavy anymore. I had started to rebuild. I was moving forward. But she was still trapped in the mess she had made. And that was the one thing I knew for sure. She wasn't going to be able to escape this. Not this time. By the time Avery realized she couldn't talk her way out of everything, it was too late. The calls stopped coming, the clients stopped trusting her. Her name was becoming a joke, a whisper behind closed doors. She had always prided herself on her image, her ability to charm, to manipulate, and now it was all crumbling in front of her eyes. Watching her fall apart was almost surreal. I had spent so many years trying to make our life work, believing in her, in us, and now I was watching her drown in the mess she created. She didn't give up though. She kept trying to fight back, throwing all sorts of desperate moves my way. The more she fought, the more her true colors showed. She tried reaching out to people from her past, old friends, old clients. But the thing about a lie is, once it's exposed, it can't be put back together. And Avery's lies had been exposed, not just to me, but to everyone she had used to climb her way up. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything she had done to get ahead, all the people she had stepped on. Avery tried going after me legally, too. She hired a lawyer, tried to drag the divorce out, hoping for a bigger settlement. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office when I got the papers. The whole thing felt like a bad joke. Her lawyer tried to twist the narrative, make me look like the villain for making accusations about Luca and for taking the money. But I wasn't worried. I had evidence. I had everything documented. She had no case. When I showed up in court, I could see it in her eyes. She was scared. And it wasn't just the divorce proceedings that had her rattled. It was everything. She had lost control of her life. And she knew she was never going to get it back. It was almost a relief, seeing her like that. She had been so damn confident, so sure that she could get away with everything. And now, I could see the cracks in her armor. I could see the woman she really was. Vulnerable, lost, desperate to hang on to anything that resembled power. But I wasn't there to make her feel better. I was there to make sure she paid for what she did. The media was still running stories about Luca's arrest and the shady business dealings surrounding his massage parlor. Every time I saw a headline, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. Her affair wasn't just ruining her personal life. It was destroying her professional reputation, too. And all the while, she was losing everything. Her friends, her clients, her connections. One by one. I had made sure of that. Her final humiliation came when her closest family members turned their backs on her. Her parents, who had always been more or less indifferent to me, finally saw her for what she was. I remember getting a call from her mother one afternoon. "Jackson, I just wanted to apologize," she said, sounding defeated. We didn't know. We didn't know about Luca, about how things had gotten so bad." It was the first time I had heard those words from her. "Thank you," I said, but I didn't really feel anything. The damage had already been done. Her family had allowed this to go on for years, turning a blind eye to all the cracks in Avery's character. Avery didn't take it well, of course. She raged at her parents for abandoning her, accusing them of siding with me. But it didn't matter. They were done with her. They had seen enough. I wasn't sure exactly when it happened, but somewhere along the way, Avery lost everything. She was no longer the confident, manipulative woman who had walked all over me. She was a shadow of herself, alone, isolated, and struggling to stay afloat in a world that was now indifferent to her. At some point, she stopped fighting. There were no more angry calls, no more pleading, just silence. And that was the final sign to me that the war was over. But even then, I couldn't fully relax. Not yet. The hardest part was over for me, but Avery's destruction wasn't complete. I wasn't going to let her rebuild herself after everything she had done. She had destroyed the life we built together, and I wasn't going to let her try to salvage any of it. I was going to make sure she stayed down. A few weeks later, I got a call from Lila. She had been keeping an eye on Avery, trying to keep tabs on how she was holding up. Lila's voice was low, like she was walking on eggshells. "Jackson, I think you should know. Avery's trying to make a comeback. She's already started contacting people in her industry again, trying to rebuild her image." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. "Not happening," I muttered. "I'm not letting her bounce back from this. She doesn't get to do that." Lila paused for a moment. "What are you going to do?" I thought for a second. "I'll make sure it's impossible for her to get any of her clients back. I've got contacts in the media, people who can bury her for good. She'll never recover from this." "You sure about this?" "I have to be," I said. "She made me pay for years. It's time she learned what real consequences feel like." And just like that, I set my plan into motion again. I fed the media more stories about her, about how she had ruined her own career. I reached out to her former clients and reminded them why they had dropped her in the first place. I made sure that every attempt she made to rebuild her life was met with walls, each one more impenetrable than the last. By the time Avery realized she was truly trapped, it was too late. Her options were gone. The business opportunities she had been clinging to vanished. The media had turned on her, her name dragged through the mud. She was a pariah, no longer welcome in the circles she once ran in. It felt good. Not because I wanted to see her suffer. Okay, maybe a little, but because I knew she would never again have the chance to hurt anyone the way she had hurt me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And Avery had finally gotten what she deserved. I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece. I had adopted a child, a son who brought me more joy than I could have imagined. I was healing, growing, moving forward. And while Avery was left with nothing, I was creating a future I could be proud of. A future without her. It's been a while now. Months, maybe a year, since everything went down. Life's settled into a rhythm. I don't think about Avery as much anymore, but when I do, it's not with anger or bitterness. At least, not in the way I used to feel. No, now it's more like a distant memory, a chapter in my life that I've closed. The court finalized the divorce long ago. Avery didn't even try to fight it at the end. Her lawyer called me up one last time, asking if I'd be open to mediation, but I wasn't interested. Avery had made her choice. Now, she had to deal with the fallout. She had no one left. Her family, her friends, her career, everything had crumbled. She was a shell of the person I had once known, and to be honest, I wasn't sure she'd ever fully recover from what happened. But that's not my problem anymore. In the end, I did exactly what I set out to do. I didn't want to watch her suffer. I didn't want her to feel like she had nothing left. But I also wasn't going to let her get away with betraying me and thinking she could just start over like nothing had happened. She had made a mess of everything, of us, and it was time for her to face the consequences. I'd like to think I was fair, in a way. I didn't drag her through the mud out of spite. But I sure as hell wasn't going to help her cover up the mess she'd made. Looking back, I see how much of myself I lost in that marriage. I'd given so much, trusted so deeply, and in the end, all I got was heartbreak. But it's funny how life works out. You think you've hit rock bottom, that there's no way you'll come back from something so brutal. But then you wake up one day, and you realize that the pieces you thought were broken can be put back together. That's what happened to me. I didn't expect it, but it came in the form of a little boy, a child I adopted from the orphanage where I started volunteering after the divorce. I didn't plan on becoming a father, not like this. But when I met Caleb, something just clicked. He was this shy little kid, all wide-eyed and nervous, but there was something about him. I can't explain it, but it was like we were meant to find each other. We connected instantly. Being a dad has been the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also been the most rewarding. There's this feeling you get when you see your kid's face light up because they trust you. You're their safe place. That feeling of purpose, of love. It's been the healing I didn't even know I needed. Then came Hannah. I met her at the orphanage. She was this warm, kind woman who seemed to understand how broken the world could make you. We connected over our shared experiences with adoption, with the things we'd seen and lived through. There was something so genuine about her. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was who she was. And that was more than enough for me. We didn't rush anything. But slowly, over time we grew closer. We started spending more time together, talking late into the night about everything. About life. About loss. About healing. She understood me in a way no one else had. I started to realize I didn't need to fix everything that was broken in my past. I just needed to build something new. And with her by my side, I knew that's exactly what I was doing. Eventually we got married. It wasn't some grand, over-the-top wedding, just a quiet ceremony with close friends and Caleb, of course. It was simple, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was happy. I was whole again. Meanwhile, Avery's life? Well, it's not my problem. I don't know what she's up to these days, but from what I hear through the grapevine, she's still trying to salvage whatever's left of her career. She's made a few desperate attempts to get back into the game, but it's clear to everyone now, she's not the same woman who once had everything. The affair, the lies, the fallout, it's all taken its toll. And she knows she can't undo any of it. But none of that matters to me anymore. I've got my family now. I've got Caleb, I've got Hannah, and I've got a life that's better than I ever could have imagined. Sure, there are still hard days, but they don't compare to the ones I had when I was stuck in that toxic marriage, when I was chasing after someone who didn't even know how to love me. I think Avery thought she could keep doing whatever she wanted, that there wouldn't be consequences. She thought she'd always be able to manipulate and control people. But you can only live that way for so long before it all catches up with you. I guess, in the end, she learned the hard way that actions have consequences. And me? I learned something too. I learned that sometimes, the worst things that happen to you can end up leading you to the best things. It's not about getting revenge. It's about taking control of your own life and finding peace again. I don't regret what happened with Avery. Not anymore. It was painful, yeah. It was brutal, absolutely. But it pushed me to become someone better. Someone stronger. Someone who could finally walk away and build something real, something lasting. I don't need Avery to see that I'm better off without her. I know it. And so do the people who matter now. This is my life. And it's the one I've fought for. I didn't just get back up. I built something new. And that's worth more than anything she could have ever taken from me. That's how I know I won.